The chair now lays out Senate Bill 37 by Senator Creighton, Governor Creighton, and recognizes him to explain the bill.
Okay.
Governor Creighton.
Yeah.
Yes.
For about 21 more hours, Senator West. Yeah.
All right, Governor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate Bill, we have the governor and the lieutenant governor out of the state of Texas today. So as the president pro tem, that role falls to me for a very, very brief period of time. That's what our
We have a
members are
series
talking
of
about
executive
today.
orders for
Yes.
you to sign.
Yes. I'm not unpacking, let's just put it that way.
That's right.
Senate Bill 37 seeks to address the authority of faculty senates. It seeks to bolster governing board authority and ultimately restore core curriculum as a focus and the center of the university system's curriculum that's offered to be prioritized to lead to degrees of value. The intersection of these three topics is something my office and I have been researching over the past year, as well as our committee. As our former higher education subcommittee members may recall, we had an interim hearing in the fall where we explored how university governance and the structures within university governance can ultimately impact curriculum, course content, and campus culture, for better or for worse. Our state's colleges and universities are absolutely among the best in the nation. We produce world-class graduates, groundbreaking research, and innovations that fuel our local, state, and national economies. That is why it is important now more than ever for governing boards to be solution-oriented, in line with legislative intent, and also working to ensure that all of our Texas higher education institutions remain good stewards of student tuition dollars and taxpayer dollars in order to maintain our state's distinction in a rapidly evolving global market. Our higher education institutions must stay focused on degrees of value, academic excellence, and research with real-world impacts. Achieving this requires accountability and efficiency and sometimes reform. Senate Bill 37 codifies that faculty senates or councils remain advisory only, restricts the number of faculty senate members who serve at one time, and creates term limits for faculty senate service, also putting a ceiling on their influence in several different categories. The bill also seeks to create more transparency surrounding faculty senates, requiring that their meetings be live streamed, their agendas be posted in advance, and that they establish quorum rules. Faculty senates will be required to roll call vote on contentious agenda items, such as votes of no confidence on university leadership. Senate Bill 37 bolsters governing board authority by giving them the final say on the hiring of senior administrators, tenure track job postings, and any recommendations made by the faculty senate on matters related to curriculum and academic policies. The bill also seeks to dismantle the notion that serving on a governing board of a university system is only an honorary position, by not only reinforcing the training of board members following their appointment and confirmation, but also making clear to prospective board members what their responsibilities, duties, and obligations will be, and the time commitment that will be expected of them prior to the application process. This bill seeks to bolster core curriculum and minor and certificate programs to ensure that they are in alignment with workforce demand and a responsible use of taxpayer dollars that would ultimately lead our graduates in the university system to the jobs that they all expect as they finish out their college years, assess any monies that they may have spent or they may still owe for that college education, and hopefully finding placement in the workforce with that degree of value in a way that meets their expectations. Boards will appoint general education review committees at all institutions composed of industry leaders and faculty to review and refine courses that satisfy students' core curriculum requirements, ensuring, again, that these courses are foundational and practical. Additionally, low-performing minors and certificate programs will undergo regular evaluation by presidents and provosts, with regents having the final authority to phase out expensive programs that continue to fail to attract students or provide value to students once they have finished those particular courses. To further safeguard the integrity of Texas higher education, Senate Bill 37 creates an Office of Excellence in Higher Education, a new agency administratively attached to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board that will be tasked with investigating reports of noncompliance with state law, transparency requirements, and university policies. This office will report problems to the Attorney General, Governor, and Legislature, ensuring swift action to remedy those problems will be addressed. Strong oversight is essential to keeping our Texas universities at the forefront of education and innovation. With taxpayer dollars and student futures at stake, universities must operate with accountability with those provisions above that have been mentioned. Senate Bill 37 will ensure this transparency and accountability at all of our academic institutions. And members, I encourage you to help us pass this much-needed legislation along with the bills that we're laying out together with Senate Bill 37 to, again, bolster governing board authority, set expectations for the future for these leaders in higher education, and to realign core curricula at our public colleges and universities with practical knowledge and skills.
Very good.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Members, are there any questions? Senator Creighton. Senator West.
Now, is this going to be for all three of the bills at this point? Questions on all three of the bills? That's right.
Yes.
Okay. I understand exactly where the governor, lieutenant governor, and chair of the committee is going with this particular bill. Let's just let's have a conversation about it. It seems as though that the three bills that have been filed is kind of revamping the student senate, revamping the job for a member of the Board of Regents, requiring additional training of those members when they get on the Board of Regents, and focusing with laser certainty on what the purpose of higher education, at least higher education is all about in the state of Texas. And in great part, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I want to kind of delve into establishing we don't believe in large governments in the state, but we're talking about, frankly, establishing another agency, and spending, I think it was about $2 million in the budget or something like $1 million in the budget for it. And the question is are we duplicating things that are already taking place in the Higher Education Coordinating Board? And if so, why are we doing that? And as it relates to the role of the Senate, of the Senate faculty, why are we starting to put, I guess you could say, handcuffs on what they are able to do? I want to see exactly why we're doing this. When you begin to think about the boards of regents, right now we have total administrators throughout all the different boards of regents, and you have like 2,452. That's with department heads. And we're expecting volunteers to be responsible for hiring, signing off on all of these administrators. And I'm trying to figure out why are we doing this, as opposed to fixing whatever problems we have with the existing structure. So I'd like to know about that. When you don't, if you just take into consideration all of the administrators except for the deans, and we have some information on it if you'd like it, we'd be talking about like 1,893 administrators that would be subject to this particular bill. And again, we're asking volunteers on these boards of regents that meet, what, twice a year? How many times? Four?
Probably per quarter.
I think it's once a quarter, right? Okay, they meet once a quarter. We're asking them to be in a position to do all of this with some training, as opposed to, again, trying to fix the problems as opposed to throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Now, the direction that you're talking about, I concur with as it relates to the education. But I'd just like to get some feedback from my three colleagues about what's the problem and what are we trying to fix. I guess I'll start with Senator Middleton.
Senator Mays.
Thank you, Madam
Senator
Chair.
Mays Middleton.
Yeah,
Mays.
thank you. So,
I'm just too comfortable.
Senator
calling
Bedcore
you
uses
first.
that one a lot.
No.
I go by both. It just gives the regents more oversight. You know, there's a lot of layers, right? And accountability technically stops with them. I mean, we definitely agree on that, I think, right? Where obviously this is the governance board for our public institutions. And
So you would agree that right now they're accountable and responsible for, ultimately accountable and responsible. So what's the problem with the system right now?
But they don't really have a full say in every decision, and nor should they in every management decision, just like with us where there could be veto power. Like you get a notice, I guess, when someone gets appointed in your district, if what you think of that, or they've applied, or and so what it does is it gives them the same type of oversight that they have now with tenure, right? So they're the ones that are actually approving this list of recommendations for tenure, and it's really not. It's not an overwhelming number of positions like at well, at UT Austin, it's 82 department heads, and I don't think they, turn over all that often. I mean, there is a number of that turnover every year, but I mean, that's if 100% turned over in a year, it'd be 82. So it's not going to be an overwhelming number. But you think of the layers now, where you have the regents, then under them you have the president, chancellor, then you have the provost, and you have the vice provost.
At all due respect, I understand that the administration and how it's stacked up and organized. My question to you is, Board of Regents has the ultimate say, so save it except the legislature governing all that stuff. They know what's going on. They're charged with the responsibility of knowing what's going on in their system. That includes hiring the person responsible for making decisions. That ends up being the chancellor, and holding the chancellor responsible for complying with all of the edicts that we pass here in the Senate and otherwise. And so I'm trying to figure out why now are we saying that these volunteers, have to be responsible for hiring of the department heads, when implicitly they're already responsible for it through the person that they hire, that being the chancellor. And in any corporate organization, that's what you normally have.
Well, so they're not going to be the ones hiring. That's still up to the dean, to work with the vice provost, and it's a little bit different on each institution how that works. It's just a veto power is all. So they're not going to be the ones going on the search committee and, well, who do we need to hire for this position for the history department? But it does give them a little oversight on the back end of it, where they can veto that recommendation.
They can do that now, though, can't they?
No.
Yes, they can. They can do that through making certain that holding the chancellor, the administrator that they hire, responsible for decisions made as it relates to people that are hired as department heads at these institutions. And the chancellor holds the presidents responsible. And the presidents at those institutions, correct me if I'm wrong here, hold the deans responsible. So what's the problem with the current system when we have all these checks and balances?
Well, we kind of don't. It's blunt force tool. In other words, if the regents were unhappy with the chancellor or the president's decisions that trickle down eventually to the department heads,
Okay.
the remedy is get rid of the chancellor or the president. Well, there could be a lot of other factors that go into that. I mean, you're talking about like UT Austin, for example. I mean, these are large institutions. You're factoring in all sorts of different issues into that, when maybe the problem was really just with the department head hire.
Right. So again, Why throw the baby out with the bathwater as opposed to fixing the problem? If indeed you have a issue with the department head, then the dean should be responsible for fixing it, not the Board of Regents. I mean, this is kind of a radical departure from the current structure. Now, if we're talking about what the philosophy should be for higher education, that's one thing. But now we're starting to tinker with the structuring part and throwing out the entire structure for some strange reason, as opposed to fixing the specific issues that we have with the structure. That's
I just think it gives more adequate oversight with who the buck
well. I
really
mean,
stops
the
with.
Republicans control this, okay? I mean, y'all control it. So whatever you want to have happen in higher education is going to happen. That's the bottom line. I know that, but I'm not just going to sit here idly and sit up and say it's okay when there's really no problem with some of these things that we're talking about. Okay, you want to change the structure for no real apparent reason, other than you want members of the Board of Regents that are volunteers, that really have other businesses outside of being volunteers on the Board of Regents. I can see holding the chancellor responsible because he's a staffer, and the other staff responsible for it. But going as far as sitting up and saying that we need to hold the volunteers responsible.
And Central West, I'd like to jump in as well. Central Middleton, I know Central Betancourt.
I'm used to this.
You're used to this.
Yeah, of course.
You're doing a great job. What you talking about?
Thank you very much.
Welcome. I guess my answer to follow up with Senator Middleton's very thorough answers is that the ball has moved. The expectations of those that decide in the future and are currently serving as boards of regents, the expectations on those particular individuals have increased. So right now, we know and we have an understanding, as you've done a very good job at mentioning, they have duties and obligations and responsibilities, and they seek these positions. We're codifying those responsibilities to make sure that not only are they codified, but it is a signal that as we work with Madam Chair, who not only is she chairing this committee right now as I lay out this bill, and she serves as our vice chair, but she is chair of nominations. And our future regents will go through the nominations process for confirmation from the Senate with the expectation of knowing that the ball has moved. And the expectations are higher that there will be, beyond the honorary position that it is seen as by some, a heavy responsibility to commit time and focus and work ethic, which they already do, on what happens day to day on these campuses. So yes, there is an incredible administrative framework, and this bill is not to supplant that. And these bills are not to supplant that. But it is of great concern to many Texans what is happening on our campuses day to day, as we've seen examples of that just in this last year that have been national news. And our regents are ultimately responsible for the day-to-day decisions and the outcomes tied to those campuses, whether it be student outcomes or graduation rates or ultimately degrees of value offered by the university, and their responsibility. I'm not even sure that our boards of regents today, once they're appointed and confirmed by the Senate, that they have an orientation, all of them, to understand exactly what the full scope and scale of their job duties are and those expectations and what are placed upon them. So this bill, in some ways, and these other two bills cover what they already are doing in many capacities for that final review and that oversight that you mentioned that they already have. But in other ways, it's codifying those expectations because, if education isn't the hottest issue on the landscape, it's right there with them.
I agree with you.
Yes.
May I respond?
Absolutely.
Madam Chair,
Senator West.
let me give you a novel idea. Then, as opposed to having them go through the nominations committee, why don't we have them go through the higher education committee as a part of the nomination process to make certain they understand and appreciate and have the wherewithal to perform the duties and responsibilities that this legislation is placing on them. And by doing that, and nominations committee, I've been on once before, has general jurisdiction on all nominations. Why don't you bring them through the education committee so we can focus with laser certainty on whether or not they are, number one, up to the task, and frankly, are able, I would assume that if the governor nominates someone, they're up to the task, but that they understand and appreciate exactly what we're talking about, their responsibilities are. What about that?
It's a great suggestion, but it would be duplicative. I know that Madam Chair, as Chair of Nominations, in her grace and hospitality, is always welcoming members that don't serve on the committee, but that do serve on education, to visit and be a part of that nominations process, and to ask those same questions that we would also provide, right? So, your suggestion is actually what we're working on, but it's not a duplicative effort.
But again, we don't. It doesn't have to be duplicative. They come through this committee for the nomination to our higher education institutions. They don't have to go through the nominations committee. That task, that responsibility should be delegated. I shouldn't say delegated. It should be given to this particular committee to see exactly who's being chosen and have them, and we kind of look at their fitness in order to serve. Okay, I don't have a problem with the direction that you're going in terms of the philosophy and responsibilities. But again, we got to make sure it's the right people that we're talking about.
Sure.
That get this responsibility. And I think if you want to focus as you're doing, I don't agree with everything that you're doing, but you don't agree with everything that I do. I agree, though, that we have to make certain higher education system, be it public education, higher education system, is second to none. And by having those persons come through this committee, through the nomination process, it gives us an opportunity to see what their fitness is for the particular position.
I appreciate the suggestion. I don't have a bill to take jurisdiction away from Madam Chair as Chair of Nominations. I don't have a bill to do so, and I don't prefer to do that. I would rather visit her committee and hold those nominees accountable upon your invitation. Correct. And I think that's how it works now.
It is.
Right.
Okay, well, I just made a recommendation. That's all.
Thank you, Senator Creighton. Thank you, Senator West. Senator Bettencourt.
Thank you, Madam
Something
Chair.
to add.
Senator West, in way of response, the reason why I filed this bill is because there's not any code that defines faculty councils or senates. So we're doing an initial definition, and the concept is that you've got an administration, which you've talked about, that's responsible for the operation of the institution, and a faculty senate it should have an advisory role. I think, Mr. Chairman, and also Senator Middleton, I think Senator West's point is that he's trying to say that there's multiple leapfrog possibilities here. He's bringing up a concept that instead of the Board of Regents, a chancellor could do that veto job, or effectively even though it'd be Senate rule, not a bill, that somehow this committee would be involved in the nominations for regents. But more importantly, I think that what we're all trying to accomplish is, let's take a look at the system, because you're right, Mr. Chairman, the ball has moved. And so let's make sure that we take a look at all possible options, because that's really what Senator West is trying to bring up. And when we're looking through this public testimony today, because I'd love to hear what Ray Bonilla has to say, because he's been around longer than Senator West. Okay.
Where's Ray? Okay.
He's over here in the corner.
Have we finished that?
And
Court? Is there anything
right, and
more?
so and I know you have invited witnesses too, and but because I know the intent of this bill is just to lay out the roles of what a faculty senate is, and we don't want it to be a Texas Senate, type of model. So with that was my contribution.
Thank you, Senator Bettencourt. Members, are there any other questions of Senator Bettencourt, Senator Middleton, or Senator Creighton regarding these bills? Okay. So would you like to move to public testimony? All right. The chair now opens public testimony.